Welcome back to Inside the NBA, presented by Kia. The playoff buzz the last 24 hours was all about the most confusing 13.5 seconds in sports, the finish of the Oklahoma City San Antonio game. The NBA released its last 2-minute report and said the officiating crew missed 5 calls in the last 13.5 seconds. And here they were at AT&T Center. Number 1, Manu Ginobili stepping over the line. That should have been a technical foul shot by OKC. Then you had the contact, waiters on Ginobili. Should have been ruled a foul. The third, well, you got Patty Mills all over Steven Adams. That should have been called. So should this. Kawhi Leonard with a hold of Russell Westbrook's jersey. And the 5th missed call. After the Mills miss, it's LaMarcus Aldridge who is fouled by Serge Ibaka. But the game ends 98-97, much to the chagrin of Greg Popovich. Joe Borgia is the NBA's Senior Vice President of Replay and Referee Operations. Joe, look, I know it's a tough job. Nobody in their right mind would want to do it. But how concerned are you that 5 mistakes were made in the closing seconds of a 1-point playoff game?
Well, Ernie, it wasn't our best 13 seconds. I mean, we have to be real. But, when you're watching the game live in real time, most of those errors weren't seen. I mean, I think there was one major obvious one that all the fans and everybody saw, and that was the offensive foul during the throw-in by waiters. All the other plays, they weren't observed until post-game when you start reviewing and you start looking at, every player and picking and saying, oh, look, this, and that. Now, with that said, they are all errors. They all should have been called. If we got the first one, the other 4 never would have happened.
Joe, let me ask you 2 questions. Number 1, do you think with technology, now with 3D, 4D televisions, the ability to slow calls down that puts you officials at a disadvantage? Number 1, that's my first question. But also, secondly, I think it's very unfair for the NBA to come out after the fact and tell officials they made mistakes. Can you answer those 2 questions, please?
Well, Charles, if you go back in the past, we used to release when there was, a major error by a referee at the end of a game that possibly cost the team a game. But we never released any of the great no calls or good calls they made. So really, with the the last 2-minute report, we have a standard of exactly when the reports are going to go out, 5 points or less, or any time a game goes to overtime. And really, if you look at the body of work over the course of a season, or a referee's body of work, they're very accurate. Okay, this was an unfortunate play. That it was like helter-skelter out there, and one thing seemed to lead to the other, and the next thing you know, you have 5 errors in a very short period of time.
Joe, it's Shaq. Chuck played 20 years. I played 20 years. Kenny played 18 years. You think the ref didn't make the call because the play was never been seen before?
Shaq, I don't know. I did not talk to the refs. The referee that was on the throw-in, he's got his count going. You had waiters who was sort of had room behind him but kept inching forward. You got Ginobili jumping back forth, left and right. You're down to about 4 seconds, and all of a sudden something happens. And I think as a referee, I know I was in here, I go, what did he just do? He didn't just do that, did he? And by the time you process it and think about it, the play is over, and all of a sudden Durant's catching the ball and he's on the floor, and then it's too late to get it. So it may have surprised them a little bit because they've never seen it before, but there was so much going on. The referee, like I said, with the count, watching Ginobili, watching waiters, a lot of stuff, and it was probably too much.
So can we get a real accurate, just on the play with waiters and Ginobili, because that's the one that most people hadn't seen before. What should have been the call, what should have happened, and what would have been correspondent if that was called?
Well, Kenny, you're right. That was the elephant of all of them. That's the one, all the fans in the arena and on TV saw. So basically we have, once the offensive player is given the ball by the referee, any illegal contact by an offensive player should be deemed an offensive foul. Now, normally you're talking about the 4 offensive players on the court setting an illegal screen or pushing somebody away, but you have to include the thrower in. and he does lean forward and give a shove with his elbow forearm, which dislodged Ginobili. Therefore, it should have been an offensive foul called, and San Antonio would take possession at that spot, and the game clock would have stayed at 13.5.
And it's not a technical foul.
Not the offensive foul would not be a technical foul,
Gotcha.
no.
Well, first of all, I just learned this. I got two quick questions before we finish up. Number one, if Ginobili comes across the line in the last couple of minutes, is that it used to be a delay of game, now it's a technical?
It's a delay of game, but because it happens in the last 2 minutes at the throw-in spot, it becomes an automatic technical foul. And that was instituted when all the teams were taking the delay so they could see what the offense was running, putting the offense at an unfair disadvantage. So the rules and competition at that time said, we need to penalize that with a technical foul on the first delay.
Okay, now second question. Me and Shaq got a bet. When you in the replay booth all night, are you drinking gin or vodka martinis when you're sitting there all night?
There was a lot of us could have used a drink last night, Charles.
Hey, Joe Borgia, we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Joe.
And
thanks for having me, guys.
If there is an upside to all of this, Joe, it's this. Next time you're in Atlanta to tape the show on NBA TV, Making the Call, you already have an episode already in the can for next season. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Joe. Back with much more.